Welcome to our Begutzy one-on-one number 2. Today our guest is Liz Fusco. Liz is a sport performance dietitian for the USRowing. She's a registered dietitian nutritionist, specializes in sport nutrition for elite endurance athletes. She worked with the USOPC, the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and she also attended 2016 Rio Olympics with these athletes. She is a consultant for USA triathlon and cycling athletes training for 2021 Tokyo Olympics. Today, we're going to cover a broad range of subjects with Liz, from keeping athletes fueled well during COVID-19 to tips for all of us out there about how to eat better and have the right amount of micronutrients in our body. I hope you enjoy our discussion today and that you find some value in our chat.
Hi, David.
Nice to see you today. Before we start getting into the interview, I just wanted to tell you that, you're one of the main reasons why Begutzy Organic today is an official partner of USRowing. You reached out to us, I believe it was in 2018, to inquire about our brand. And I remember coming to meet you with Susan in Princeton. I think it was in May 2018, actually. So we really loved working and partnering with the team at USRowing. And I personally, because I have a lot of admiration for the rowing sport because my father was a French rower champion, and so big thank you to you. Before we get into things, so how have you been keeping? Since COVID happened, tell us a bit more about how you've been doing.
Well, I've been doing pretty well, actually. It was a little hectic in the very beginning. I was in Chula Vista with the team. And we had just completed the initial phases of selection for Tokyo. I was in a break period, resting and getting ready to drive back to the East Coast for the last phase of training and competition before the games. And it started to get pretty serious. So a friend of mine in Vermont called me, and my boyfriend and I have been traveling here for a while, and said, I think you need to leave California. I think you should leave today. Wow. So I ended up packing up the following morning, and I drove cross country in 3 days, in the middle of which I gave a webinar and was pretty tired looking on the video, but got it done. And I've actually been living in Vermont since then, and we just started a farm. So we're just
the background looks
tending
amazing.
The land.
Yeah, pretty impressive.
Yeah, got some apple trees behind me. So
really unlike me, who is stuck in not stuck, but living in Manhattan, around buildings all over me. So let me ask you. First question I would like to ask you is, obviously I'm very impressed with what you've achieved so far, especially at such a young age. Being a sport performance nutritionist and working with such emblematic organization like the USRowing and also the USOPC, and you've been impacting the diet of US gold medalist Olympians, and so it sounds like a really dream job to most of us, right? So before we get into how did you manage to get to where you are today, tell us first of all, how did you get that kind of passion and love for food and healthy eating in the first place?
Well, it was pretty simple, actually. I grew up about an hour away from here, in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. And I grew up in a breakfast. So we had quite a few rooms and we had guests, and I learned how to cook and became passionate about it really young. My dad had owned a restaurant for a brief period of time, so I thought about cooking as a profession, but really loved science and science fairs. So once I learned that registered dietitian was something that you could be, that's what I decided to study. So I think I was about 15 when I decided to become a registered dietitian.
Wow, that's young, huh? That's
yeah.
It's like a calling.
I grew up kind of fast, and really just was really passionate about cooking the whole time, and really have thought about going to culinary school multiple times over the past 10 years or so, but everything has always led me back to sport. It's the thing that I'm most passionate about. So
all right, so talking about sports, getting that dream job, sounds pretty cool and kind of but it's not that easy, right? So It's you mentioned to me before that you had a lot of adversity, you took tons of risk, you had to push hard, and you have to stay confident and make sure that you accept the hardship along the way. So tell us a bit more about like how does one young person like you become like such a successful dietitian, a professional performance sport dietitian per se?
Well, it took a lot of time and effort. I started my undergraduate career in 2007 at the University of Rhode Island. And after 2 years, I had worked really hard. The science classes were very difficult for me, but I'd maintained a pretty good GPA. And my advisor sat me down and told me that I didn't have a high enough GPA to get a dietetic internship and that I should probably change my major to something different.
Pretty shocking, right? That must have been like
I obviously, and it was a pretty manageable GPA, like it wasn't too low, but that really lit a fire under me. I told her I wanted to be a sports dietitian, and she said, at this rate, you have a less than 1% chance.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I used that as a lot of ammunition as to just pursue as much as I could. I was working in the lab as an undergraduate research assistant. I was volunteering for a sports nutrition course as a senior in college. So I was grading for them with a graduate student working in their lab. We did a lot of eating rate research. So we looked at how eating rate influences total energy intake and body weight and all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. I did a little bit of research in physiology as well and applied to the internship. Didn't get the internship, just like my advisor had said.
Right.
So fortunately, I had multiple backup plans, and San Diego State was the choice that I made because they had a dual master's degree program in exercise physiology and nutrition science. Mm-hmm. And I knew that San Diego was where there were a lot of athletes and a lot of sport. So I traveled out there after my undergrad, and I got right to it. I started working in the lab after about 8 months into school, studying carbohydrate metabolism.
Which we'll talk about in a bit, yeah.
We will. And then I started volunteering at the Olympic Training Center as an unpaid assistant after bugging them for about 9 months.
Right.
And a year into that, it took a little bit of pursuing. Right. About a year into that, I started an assistantship with them where I worked with a lot of team sports in conjunction with a mentor of mine, like rugby, volleyball, water polo. And then I reapplied to the internship and I got it.
All right.
So that's what took me, I went to Texas after that. I worked in the medical center there for 6 months, and I passed my RD exam and started with the Olympic Committee about a year and a half before the Rio Olympics with all of the endurance sports.
Amazing. Yeah. And from there, it's just only took off, huh?
Yeah, it's only taken off from there.
All right. So you ended up going to the Rio Olympics, and then after the Rio Olympics, tell us a bit more about the journey there, because you ended up focusing on USRowing partnership more.
Yeah, so prior to Rio, I was working with 7 different sports, as I've said, and it was a lot. It was a lot of different athletes, and it was really fun, but I really wanted to focus on USRowing. It was an organization that I had developed a good relationship with, and the athletes are phenomenal. They work extremely hard. So after the games, I took a full-time position with USRowing. And I still work just a little bit on the side with some athletes through the Olympic and Paralympic Committee.
Paralympics. Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. So you've been working with USRowing, and that's how we met. You guys were preparing, athletes and so on for the Tokyo Olympics, and then all of a sudden, COVID-19 kind of challenged everyone on this, and just everything kind of took a pause. Like the Tokyo Olympics have been postponed at this stage. It's been, I'm sure, super hard for athletes to stay focused, on and eat well during such an isolating and kind of stressful time. So just tell us, from that standpoint, like how have you been able to kind of like help athletes kind of cope with, by distance, kind of making sure that you provide them with tips on simple tips to better eat and and take care of the diet, while everybody is kind of isolated.
Yeah. I will say it was definitely really challenging, and there was a whole range of emotion. I think a lot of athletes went through all of the stages of grief, including acceptance. So we're just chugging along, and most people are in really good spirits and are honestly like, you know what, give me another year. Let's see. What's one more year of training?
Right.
Might
So
as well.
have you been in touch with them? Like, so you guys doing Zoom? Like, what kind of, how do you stay in
So
touch?
So with the changing climate, the economic climate, a lot of sports organizations have lost a significant portion of their funding, and USRowing is no exception to that.
Mm-hmm.
So sadly, they had to lay off a majority of staff, and I was fortunate to have been furloughed by USRowing. I still am furloughed. So the work that I'm doing is primarily through partner organizations like boat clubs, being funded through donors, private companies like Begutzy, and trying to get the message out however I can. I obviously still have a relationship with some of these athletes, so we talk, on and off more informally. But I think the other thing is that this group specifically, I've known for 4 or 5, 6 years, some of them now. Yeah. So they've really developed as athletes, and in the Olympic year, the goal is really to do all of the things that you've learned exceptionally well and not to change anything drastically. Right. So I have faith that our team is doing all of the things that they can do. And one of the things that our viewers can do is donate to the National Rowing Foundation. They are the largest fundraising branch of USRowing. We're funded by also the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee, but the NRF is really important to us. So you can make a difference by donating.
All right, so we'll make sure that we have that pop up on the screen so people can help out. I mean, I know with Begutzy we've also been impacted by COVID quite a lot. I mean, every business has, and every person has, physically or also financially and so on. So we've been trying to stay true to our mission, and we're still a partner of the USRowing at this stage. And I think that obviously you've been working with these athletes for quite a while, so you must have given them a good foundation for them to have some kind of like automatism in terms of what they eat and what they do, so that's very important. So talking about eating well, there's been a lot of debate around plant-based diet, and many professional athletes like Kyrie Irving, and I know Chris Paul as well, that's performed well recently at his age in the NBA, and the Williams sisters, Lewis Hamilton's a Formula One driver. They've been raving about it and how much lighter and healthier and more energized they feel, and how much better they are in performing. As a sport performance dietitian, what's your view on this stuff? Like, do you think that you can manage to get all your micronutrients you need from it? And I know there's a lot of debate about plant-based and how do you get like the protein in that, and the zinc level and vitamin B12. Like, can you tell us a bit more about what's your view on the whole plant-based diet stuff, Riley?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's important to note that there is a wide variety of plant-based eating, ranging from complete veganism all the way to what I like to call myself and others that follow flexitarianism, which is eating plant-based several days a week. Yes, exactly. So you can find a way to positively impact your health and reduce your impact on the environment without completely eliminating meat. If it's something that an athlete or any other person feels passionately about for the right reasons, namely for the well-being of the planet and for their personal health, then I think it needs to be carefully designed, specific to athletes. I also think that there's a common conception that being lighter equates to being faster, and it really depends on how that's achieved and whether you're able to whether that's the body size that you belong in, or B, how you achieve that weight loss and for how long you sustain it. So total energy is something that can be difficult to achieve on a purely plant-based diet in an endurance athlete who has high energy expenditures. Protein is something that needs to be monitored, namely because plant-based proteins don't have the same amount of branched chain amino acids as animal proteins do. So lacto-ovo vegetarians who consume milk, eggs, cheese, those types of products can achieve the branched chain amino acid content fairly easily. Vegans may need to be a little bit more systematic in their specifically their soy consumption to try to meet the branched chain amino acid needs for exercise recovery. And then there's omega-3 fatty acids. They don't convert very easily in plant foods. So just being conscious of omega-3 status and a host of micronutrients, B12, vitamin D, calcium, zinc, iron, iodine. And all of those micronutrients are important for your immune function. So in a time like this, making sure that you're getting enough micronutrients, preferably through food, is really the way to go. So if you want to go plant-based, I'd recommend reaching out to a dietitian first.
Yeah, absolutely. And because it's all about balance, right? It's about balance and trying things without just changing everything from day one, and like incrementally changing your stuff for sure. I mean,
exactly. It's substitution, not restriction.
Sure. Okay. Also, you know, a lot of people have been raving about the keto diet. There's been a lot of bad press around carbs to the point that, you know, when people kind of look at something now and says any carb or sugar at all, people are like, it's not for me, thank you, I don't want this stuff, you know. And I know you've been working, you know, you worked on research on carbohydrate metabolism and energy balance. So what's your view as an expert on this stuff, like the whole keto, like avoid carb at all costs kind of situation?
Yeah, as a scientist, I like to always play devil's advocate. So I think the ketogenic diet is clinically indicated in glioblastoma, which is a specific type of brain cancer, and in intractable epilepsy in youth. So there are applications of it. There's also some research that shows that a ketogenic diet can help people that are obese achieve weight loss at a faster rate. The problem, though, is that if it's not a complete and sustainable diet and it's not maintainable, then as soon as it's no longer being followed, what the research has shown is that weight not only increases back to its original state, but typically beyond its original state. So the fluctuations in body weight and body composition that come with fad diets can be truly dangerous on your metabolism and on your health. Specific to endurance athletes, the ketogenic diet really doesn't fuel the energy system that we're using when we are doing the majority of our training. Carbohydrate is the primary fuel for exercise that is longer in duration and higher in intensity. So as Louise Burke would say, when the going gets hard, we eat carbohydrates. The risk with inadequate carbohydrate intake can also be instances like low energy availability, where you can have bone loss, menstrual dysfunction, hormonal issues. You can have different types of immune responses, low white blood cell counts, which makes it harder to fight off infection. So in a general sense, it is very difficult to do that in a balanced way, especially as an endurance athlete.
But not all carbs and sugars are created equal, right? So yeah, when you start looking at complex carbs and some natural sugars, you know, not sugar that's artificial, but sugar that come from nature, to a degree, we need that stuff, right? So can you develop a little bit more? Because I feel like there's a lot of education that needs to be done about the fact that not carbs are equal, and you know, and you have to be, again, it's a discussion of being balanced as well, right?
Yeah, I actually can bring that back to my graduate school research. We fed carbohydrate snacks. We gave the participants 2 different types of carb snacks to add to their typical food intake twice per day. The first snack was prunes, And the second snack was a muffin that we had developed to be exactly matched to the prunes with everything except for the fiber and the micronutrients.
Right.
So group A had the prunes, group B had the muffins. They went off and lived their lives for 2 months. And what I did was I measured their blood glucose responses to food before and after 8 weeks of snacking on carbohydrates. And these were people who were pre-diabetic, people who were overweight and had some of the symptoms of metabolic syndrome, but were not on any medications or unhealthy in any way. So what I found actually was that the plum group and the muffin group both had lower glycemic responses to carbohydrates after snacking on them for 2 months. So they were both able to process glucose faster after snacking on carbohydrates for a period of time. The plum group, however, needed way less insulin independent of time. So the plums were much more efficiently digested. They required a lot less insulin. And if our study was only 2 months long, but if we had extended it out, one of our hypotheses is that having those whole food carbohydrates could have an impact on insulin sensitivity, which is the kind of determinant of diabetes, is how well your cells are taking in glucose.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and the spike in the bloodstream as well, in terms of, as a sugar, enter your blood.
Exactly. So there's another researcher who studies fat metabolism named Elizabeth Parks, and she says you best metabolize what you've just eaten. So this kind of harkens back to the keto. Excluding carbohydrates and sugars entirely doesn't make you better at metabolizing them.
Yeah.
Incorporating them in a healthy way and balancing them with fiber and proteins and fats, that's how you best metabolize carbohydrates in that, systematically throughout the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So for, not everyone is a professional athlete. You work with peak performance athletes every day, but for a person like me that only does 2 or 3 times a week, kind of, I'm active and do exercise if I'm lucky 2 or 3 times a week. Do you have any simple kind of tips to feel better before the workout and after a workout? And I know, it depends on the workout, but in general, like what kind of like simple tips will you give someone like me to eat to eat before and after?
So my advice would be, because sometimes people are, I do work with some average Joe athletes, and I think they would approve of me saying that. And they typically have to exercise early in the morning. And one of the first things that I do is have them consume something. If it's a short bout of exercise, it could be a small amount of carbohydrate, like a piece of fruit or a glass of milk or juice, maybe a cereal bar. Some people are hesitant to eat before exercising, and I think it's important to know your gut is adaptable. So it can learn to tolerate things before exercise. So start with liquid, and then maybe work your way up to something like a smoothie or something. So simple, easy to digest, nothing that's too high in fat and fiber right before exercise, especially if you only have about an hour.
Some good carbs.
Some good carbs, but some simple ones. Simple. Yeah. So fresh fruit, maybe a sourdough bread slice, something simple.
Right.
If you have more time, then it can be more like a bowl of grainy oatmeal, or maybe you swirl a Gutsy pouch into some Greek yogurt. That's a team favorite. So beforehand, and during exercise, if you're going for longer than an hour, you might even have something with you, like a sports drink, or I like to make sports drink just water down juice and add a little salt water to it. And then after exercise, within an hour, having a meal or a complete recovery snack. That's also important for all people. And average people need to focus on this post-exercise recovery as well, because it's really how you allow your body to adapt best. And it's how you can energize yourself through the rest of the day without feeling kind of wiped out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's the role of protein after? Like, do you recharge with eating more protein after exercise?
So, if I may, There's actually 5 R's. The first one is to rehydrate. So depending on how much you sweat, having fluid, more sweat, more fluid.
Yeah.
The second one is repair. So protein is primarily used for the repair and resynthesis of muscle tissue. It also helps us to feel full and satisfied. The third is to refuel with carbohydrate. Kind of like water, the more you exercise, the more carbohydrates you need to refuel with. Reinforce our immune function with colors and healthy fats. And here's the kicker. This should be repeated through the day, every 3 to 4 hours. So this applies to all people, not just athletes. It's just the proportions that shift a little bit depending on how active you are.
The amount must be a lot lower, obviously.
So if you actually want a little visual tool, you can go to teamusa.org/nutrition, and we have an easy training day athlete plate, which basically shows the plate is half veggies, a quarter starch, and a quarter protein.
Awesome. We'll get the link on the for our fans as well. Talking of our Begutzy fans, I'm sure that they would love to hear if you have any tips for them about how to eat well and stay energized in general, especially with the fall and the flu season kind of coming our way. Any specific recommendation about certain foods and beverage that strengthen our immune system so we get ready for that, like winter ready?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of foods that can strengthen our immune system. The overarching goal should be to make sure that you're getting enough energy and calories to maintain a steady body weight. In periods of weight loss, there can be fluctuations in immune function as well. Hand washing and mask wearing, I think we all understand how important that is at this point, I hope. But for anyone who's physically active, if you do intense exercise, that can decrease your immune function. So it might be a good idea to stay away from public spaces or even grocery stores after training sessions to allow your immune system to rebound a little bit before you go into any public space. In terms of foods, citrus fruits, garlic, ginger, any type of dark leafy green, green tea, Greek yogurts and kefirs, gutsies, other fermented foods and foods that are high in fiber. Prebiotics are the fiber that feeds our gut bacteria, and probiotics are the live and active cultures. So any food product that contains that is a bit of an immune boost as well.
What about vitamin D? Do you think that because we already kind of like vitamin D, do you think that it's been talked around about, helping kind of the immune system to a degree? What about that?
Yeah, I think the challenge with vitamin D is that many people live pretty far away from the equator. So the amount of UV that we absorb from the sun is already fairly low. High sun is in the middle of the day. And in order to absorb vitamin D, you kind of have to have your arms and legs fully exposed for about 10 to 15 minutes, which is not easy to do when you're at a stay-at-home order. Even during regular life, we're often working, and athletes even have UV shirts and sunscreen on to protect themselves. So many people in the United States have low vitamin D status. We have to be careful though, because you can get a little too much, and too much of a good thing is still not a good thing. So just getting the recommended daily amount of 1,000 to 2,000 IUs per day, and getting it from a source that has third-party testing certificate, so you know that that's actually what it is. That's the best route, and people can generally consume that much on a daily basis year-round and not risk toxicity of vitamin D.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's like everything, right? I think we have this tendency, as you mentioned, to go to extremes and do things on the polar side here or there, and it's a balance again, about
exactly
having a diversified diet and also being careful about what you put in your body at different time of the day or the year and so on. But so normally we will end this Begutzy one-on-one. We the goal was to always have a challenge, because those one-on-one was supposed to be face-to-face. Physically, obviously now we are in a virtual world here. But hopefully when things kind of open up again, we can get together in Princeton, and you guys can get me on the boat so we can have a little race going, I hope.
Yeah,
You know,
aviron.
aviron, exactement. So thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate having you today with us and sharing all your knowledge. And I hope you stay well and that we see you soon.
Great. I just want to say I miss all of my athletes dearly in Princeton, and I hope to see you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.